Can a heptacampion of the world lose confidence in your car to the point of not being able to control it in a simple curve? Today we break up what really happened to Lewis Hamilton during Hungary GP practices and how this could mark a before and after in his relationship with Ferrari. The free practices day of the 2025 Hungary Grand Prix should be, at least on paper, an opportunity for Lewis Hamilton to strengthen its process of adaptation to SF-25 and show signs of progress with Ferrari. However, what ended up happening in the Hungaroring circuit was exactly the opposite. A clear and painful manifestation that synergy between pilot and a machine not only remains absent, but could be deteriorating faster than expected. From the first minute of the FP1, it was clear that Hamilton was not comfortable. His chronometer performance placed it in 5th position, but the times alone did not tell the whole story. The difference with respect to Lando Norris, the session leader, was 0.682 seconds. A brutal margin in a traction and precision circuit like this. But even more worrying was the internal gap, 0.465 seconds with respect to his partner Charles Leclerc. The latter not only affects the morale of the team, but also triggers the alarms within Ferrari's own box. Because in modern Formula One, a teammate is the first and most brutal comparison point. The critical point of that first batch came in Curve 1. There, Hamilton starred in a massive brake block that ended up completely destroying his pneumatic game. The transmission cameras captured how the SF-25 launched a dense white smoke cloud, the result of a braking without control. This was not a punctual mistake. It was the visible symptom of a fundamental disconnection between the pilot and his work tool. A car that does not respond to what is required in a circuit that demands surgical precision. The blockade was not the only incident. Shortly after, Hamilton directly cut the chicane, another indication that the car was not in its braking or lateral stability. In fact, the radio conversation that followed these events left the interpretation little place. Hamilton was direct and concise, stating that the car does not feel good. Those words, saying with a dry and unbroken tone, are a sentence. And in the F1, when a world champion like Hamilton loses confidence in his car, the problem is not only with adjustments. It is structural. In the second practice, the situation did not change too much. Although heptacampion improved his chrono with a 1:16,329 and shortened his distance with Leclerc to only 0.3, the story was the same. Lack of balance, nervousness in the rear train, and an obvious impossibility of extracting the maximum of the car in high-load conditions. But the most worrying thing is not only what happens on the track but what is generating mentally. Because if Hamilton has shown something in his career, it is that when he finds sensations in the car, it is unstoppable. But when those sensations do not arrive, their aggressive but precise style becomes a load. It shows the tension in its piloting. The effort to tame a car that is not left is noticeable. And this is not a mere interpretation. The subsequent statements of the team reflected the frustration of the environment. Ferrari expected more of this weekend, and Hamilton even more. Because these types of practice sessions should serve to build trust, and the only thing that is building where appropriate is uncertainty. At this point, what we saw in Hungary was not simply a bad practice. It was an emotional and technical resistance test. And the dominant sensation is that, for now, that test is being lost. To understand the difficulties that Hamilton lived in the practices of the Hungary Grand Prix, it is necessary to look beyond the chronos or the subjective sensations of the pilot. There is a specific set of technical, structural, and operational causes that are committing not only their performance, but also their confidence in the SF-25. It all begins with a decision that, although necessary from the regulatory point of view, has had devastating consequences in the competitiveness of the car, the forced elevation of the march of the car. Ferrari was forced to implement this change after Hamilton's disqualification in the China GP, where the wear of the sliding blocks exceeded the limits allowed by the FIA. The answer was conservative but understandable: lift the car to protect the integrity of the flat background. However, that little change alters all the dynamic behavior of SF-25. In Formula One, the march height is not just a parameter. It is one of the pillars of aerodynamic efficiency. Raising the car implies reducing the soil effect, weakening the suction that keeps the car attached to the asphalt and losing aerodynamic load directly. But it's not just that. The center of gravity, longitudinal balance, and car sensitivity in braking and acceleration is also affected. In other words, it becomes unstable, predictable only in its unpredictability. This change has forced Ferrari to implement a piloting technique that at other times would have been considered an energy management tool, but is now used as a survival measure: the lift and coast. Leclerc and Hamilton must lift their foot from the accelerator before reaching the braking areas to decrease the speed without punishing the titanium blocks under the car. This reduces structural stress, but also moves the pure performance of the car. Because by sacrificing those crucial meters of acceleration and braking, vital tenths are lost by return and, more importantly, the pilot's natural rhythm is broken. In the particular case of Hamilton, this approach is not only unnatural, it is counterproductive. His driving style has always been aggressive in braking, precise in weight transfer, and with exquisite sensitivity for curve entry. The SF-25, now higher, more loose from the back and less reactive to the brake input, is colliding frontally with that style. But if there is an area where the disconnection is total, it is in the brake system. Hamilton has spent more than a decade using carbon industry brakes in Mercedes, a system with which he had an almost symbiotic relationship. Now in Ferrari you must work with Brembo brakes, known for its initial aggressiveness and less progressive behavior. The pilot himself has described him as a lottery, a game of chance where the brake bite changes return, even between theoretically identical units. This uncertainty, added to the aerodynamic instability of the car, has caused Hungary to become a logistics and technical nightmare for the British. And all this is aggravated in the specific context of the Hungaroring circuit. A closed route, constant loading, and without large lines, where aerodynamic efficiency, balance in braking and precision in changes of direction are more important than gross power. It is a place that punishes any defect in the stability of the car. And the SF-25 in its current state has all those defects exposed to the maximum. This leaves us with an uncomfortable conclusion. Ferrari has a potentially competitive car, but is tied by technical commitments that undermine their pilots. In the case of Leclerc, whose adaptation to the equipment is natural and deep, the effects are mitigated. But for Hamilton, newcomer, the entire technical context not only hinders its integration, but threatens to become a structural barrier for its performance. And here the dilemma appears. Is the technical consistency of a car that cannot go to the limit is more, or the attempt to squeeze the maximum potential even if this implies risks such as disqualification or accelerated wear? In Hungary, Ferrari chose security. Hamilton paid the price. The Hungary Grand Prix, apart from its time leaves and visible errors, showed something much more worrying in the Ferrari universe and even more in the immediate future of Lewis Hamilton. A silent fracture, but potentially irreversible, between the pilot and the technical project of the Italian team. Because what was lived in Budapest was not a simple bad Friday. It was an emotional and mechanical radiography of a relationship that still does not find a common language. And every weekend that escapes in your hands, every car that does not respond, every balance error is not just a sporting failure. Because having Lewis Hamilton on the team not only gives you visibility and marketing, it forces you to live up to you. A team that wants to be world champion cannot afford a pilot of his caliber losing confidence, blocking brakes, or reporting basic balance problems in each weekend. If that happens, it is not just a pilot problem. It is a symptom of a technical structure that is not functioning as it should. The final message that Hungary leaves is clear. Ferrari needs to decide what he wants to be. If you want to be the Leclerc team with a development focused on the known, or if you are really going to hug the arrival of Hamilton and adapt its methodology, design and strategies to a pilot who, although new at home, has the knowledge, history, and the ability to transform it. Because if they don't do it soon, what is frustration today could become resignation. And that is the worst possible scenario for a season that still has a lot to write, but that already begins to leave deep scars. What happened in Hungary was not a simple problematic practice. It was a revealing chapter of a story that is still being written, but whose pages already show signs of conflict. Lewis Hamilton, a pilot accustomed to fighting for every thousandth, found himself in a scenario where each curve became a question and every return a negotiation with a car that does not answer as he should. In a category where margins are microscopic and sensations are everything, the fact that Hamilton does not trust SF-25 is not a footnote. It is the main headline. And the big question that is installed now is one that goes far beyond the technical. Can this relationship survive if there is no immediate evolution? Can a team like Ferrari allow you to waste time with one of the greatest talents in the modern history of Formula One without offering a platform that is, at least, at the height of its capacity? Hungary was a mirror that reflected both internal cracks and the urgency of responses. Because the rivals do not expect. McLaren continues to sharpen its development, Red Bull continues to adapt, and Mercedes is rebuilt with a long-term strategic look. Each race where Ferrari does not advance is a race where another team escapes. And Hamilton knows. Therefore, its discomfort is not only technical, it is also existential. He is running against the car, against the clock, and against his own expectation of greatness. And now I ask you directly that you are seeing this. Do you think Ferrari can redirect this situation in time? Or are we seeing the beginning of a historical disappointment among one of the best pilots of all time and the most iconic F1 team? How long do you think Hamilton will continue to support a car that does not allow you to compete at the level that your legacy demands? Leave me your opinion below in the comments.